I'm Rob Vanstone here with Ian Hamilton and Murray McCormick, and we're here to discuss the top 10 Rider poll, this time pertaining to the top offensive player in Rider history. And we knew this was going to be a good debate, and this is the reason we had an odd number of people in the panel, because otherwise I think we end up with a Ron Lancaster-George Reed tie. So Ron Lancaster won by 1 point over George Reed. Ronnie got 48 points, George got 47. Ronnie got 3 first-place votes, George got 2. You pick any other 5 people, and George might get 3 first-place votes, and Ronnie might get 2. Murray, how did you weigh in on this one?
I went with George Reed because I just pictured George doing so many things on the field that he seemed to be the guy. I kind of, there's a lot of different ways you can measure these top 10 lists. I measure who the guy in my mind made the biggest impact because it was my list. And
it's all about you,
and it's all about me. And George is the guy that when I close and think of Roughriders back in the day, that cloud of dust and pounding guys, and I have to be honest, it's not part of it, but the fact that we can still talk to him at Rider practice or pick up the phone and talk to him, and he's such a gentleman. That doesn't have anything to do with the field, but it still matters. He's the top guy in my mind.
George is still great.
He's still great, absolutely.
Ian?
I went with Ron. So there. First of all, he's the guy that gave the ball to George Reed. But I mean, we're talking about, as Murray said, a cloud of dust. I mean, that's basically the image that a lot of people have about football back in the 60s and whatnot. And yet here's Ron Lancaster, setting CFL records for career touchdown passes, et cetera, et cetera. I think not necessarily that he changed the game, but I mean, this is the guy that it kind of set the standard for quarterbacks in this league. And, not to take anything away from George Reed, but other running backs had successful careers, have had successful careers since then, but still Ronnie's numbers were still way up there.
If you ever want a reason to be able to justify sitting on the fence, it would be this one, because Ronnie or George, it's the old Betty or Veronica debate. How do you come to reach a definitive answer on this one? And I struggled with it. Eventually I looked at it and said, well, Ronnie was named the most outstanding player in the Canadian Football League twice, and George won it once. And that's about the only thing I could look at and feel even remotely comfortable about doing it. In 1970, Ronnie was named most outstanding player in the league, and George had a bad knee that year, didn't play every game. 1976, it was the Riders' first year without George Reed, and Ronnie was still named the most outstanding player in the league. So I thought, well, I weighed in what Ronnie did without George and thought that was noteworthy. What he did with George brought them the first Grey Cup in franchise history. So there's no right or wrong answer for this one. Those two just are at an echelon so far above everybody else. But it's how long has this debate been going on? Ronnie or George? 35, 40 years? It's
just funny we don't have any modern guys that kind of step up to that, maybe because it's their longevity. Like I try to think, hey, let's bring it into more of the people that are actually born when these guys are playing. Not we're all born, but we remembered football. And they just kept standing out above everybody else. We talk about Durant, we talk about some of the other guys that have come along. We just couldn't seem to get them over these two. And they're always going to be, they could have banners on the side of them in Mosaic Stadium forever, and nobody would ever question the fact that those two guys are hanging there.
I seriously thought about Kent Austin, I have to say, in the 1-2 voting, but then you start to really kind of think about things, and everything that Austin did, comes after what Lancaster did, right? So I really think that those two are the 1 and 2.
Maybe revisit this at some point if Darian Durant gets another Grey Cup or 2. But for now, it's Ronnie and George, and hey, what better guys to be talking about. Thanks for joining us. For Murray and Ian, I'm Rob Vanstone. Take care.